war.
This is what is so frustrating to me, is that in media, people aren't talking about the real motivation. They're calling it an attack on democracy. Like Russia just decided one day to attack Ukraine because they were a democracy. That's not the case at all. In reality, Russia as a country does not have the capability, it doesn't have the resources on its own to be able to maintain a lifestyle or a healthy lifestyle for its own people by itself. Russia has always been part of what was known as a union of states. The most famous union was the Soviet Union.
Right.
So Russia created this reliance where it had to rely on the other Soviet satellites so that it could feed and tax its own people. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, Russia lost its satellite states. Now, at the time, they were all so mingled together, they all needed each other to survive. But then since 91, NATO and the West have started creating new alliances with the former Soviet states. So now there are former Soviet states that are actually part of NATO. So in that process, what happened is Russia lost access to the resources that it needed to protect its own national security. One of the key, most important resources that it has is the flow of natural gas and the flow of oil.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Into Europe. And
Yes.
guess where all of that oil and gas flows through?
Russia.
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Okay.
It all flows through eastern Ukraine.
Okay.
So if Russia loses Ukraine, if Ukraine becomes pro-Western, if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, if Ukraine becomes a country that's
okay.
then it can essentially cut Russia off
Yes.
from being able to sell its fuel and oil
Yes.
anywhere.
And that's what I was going to ask you about, the energy dependence and all of that, because I knew that it was some underlining happening with that. That's so crazy.
It's not an attack on democracy. Ukraine was never a democracy, right? Amnesty International and multiple think tanks around the world have looked at Ukraine and looked at Ukraine going back to 2001 and before. And it has always been a struggling or transitional democracy. And it struggles because it's heavily corrupt. It's based off of an archaic Soviet system, right? It is not a fair and open place with human rights. It's not a democracy. I think it scored a 6 out of 10, possibly less, in terms of Amnesty International's ratings for a first world country or for a fair and equal democracy. One of the first things Ukraine did after they were invaded is they conscripted all men to mandatory service in the military. That is a human rights violation. Right? You cannot restrict the freedom of movement based on gender.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did.
Right.
So it's really tricky because most of the society is only told what benefits the narrative, because newspapers want people to read the news, and they want people to be angry, and they want people to be offended, and they want people to come back the next day and buy the newspaper again, or click on the ad, or click on the website, right? They want that. So they have to tell a story from a certain direction that triggers your emotions. That's us dealing with propaganda all over again.
Yeah. That's, to me, I look at propaganda and I see, even when I think about China and COVID, I say, man, we dealt with a lot of propaganda, even in that facet. How did the CIA, or how would someone in that position, how did you view COVID? Was that an attack, or was that?
So my assessment of COVID is that COVID was a legitimate mutation of a virus that was novel, right? It wasn't engineered. It wasn't created intentionally.
You do not believe it was engineered?
I do not believe it was engineered.
The Wuhan lab?
I believe that there was a lab.
Right.
I believe that people were looking at chemical and biological warfare. I do not believe that somebody successfully, on paper, created COVID and then replicated that plan in a test tube and then released it on its own population. I don't believe that happened. What I do believe is that maybe they were trying to create a super virus, and then somebody dropped the test tube and some bat got infected, and then that bat carried it to a rat, et cetera, and some lesser version.
I think we can live here a little while, because this is a good one. So you do not believe, help me, I mean, there's a lot being said about, again, this being engineered. There's a lot of great minds that believe this may have been engineered, and you're saying, give me some reasons why you do not believe that.
So there's a difference. First of all, I think a lot of the narrative
Engineered and released
intentionally,
yes.
Right.
Because it was engineered, could have been engineered, because we do engineer these things.
Right. So there's a couple of things, right? So first of all, I feel like a lot of the narrative that people are hearing, even from the great minds talking about an engineered virus, there's a lot of the narrative that's leaving out the details of what they're saying. So what a lot of big minds are saying is that that people have been engineering the coronavirus, right? The coronavirus is a type of cell, a type of viral cell that can attach itself and spread easily. There's lots of reasons that you would engineer a virus like that and work to use it to create something. You could use a virus like that to cure cancer. You could use a virus like that to cure disease, because it spreads and it attaches very easily. So there's lots of reasons why people would be invested.
Whoa, hold on. I go by loan. All of my interviews with everyone that you love. It's available on patreon.com. It's up there, podcast ad-free, as well as the show with just me, where I talk directly to the culture. Plenty more perks. I see you there. Let's get back to the show. But, I mean, you don't, so I don't know, man. I tend to believe that somebody released that thing.
The questions, the big questions that I would use to kind of counter that is, if you were going to intentionally create a highly infective or a highly contagious virus, why would you intentionally release it in your own country first?
Well, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we're engineering it to get it over there. Just so happened it went through, like it may have broke or something may have took.
But so right there, you said that the three criteria that we were looking for is
intentional.
It was an engineered, and it was supposed to be a virus that hurt people, and it was intentionally released. So now we're questioning whether it was intentionally released.
No, but we just spoke about Afghanistan or the Taliban, certain people using this one guy. You're going to have to take this one.
Yep. Right?
How do we know that, Agent Zero with the COVID thing, you're sacrificial? We're going to sacrifice you in this one.
Yeah, that could have happened. We don't have enough information to say whether or not that happened or didn't happen.
But we can say it was engineered.
We can say
we know for a fact that they've looked at the disease and figured out that this has been engineered.
They know that part of it is, they know that experimentation has happened to try to engineer using the core COVID COV coronavirus.
Yes.
Right? But the specific COV novel 1 and the COV novel 2, and then all of the different, derivations and mutations that have come out since then, I have not seen any evidence that any of those were specifically man-made. They said that they were tested. They said that the original COVID coronavirus itself, right? Again, I'm comparing it to a car.
Right.
Somebody took a working car. They took a working 4-cylinder Ford. They brought it into a shop. They stripped off everything except for the wheels, the engine, the motor, and then they started looking at, can we make this car stronger? Can we make this car look like a sports car? Can we make this car look like an SUV? That's the level of engineering they were doing with the original COVID virus.
But you're speaking about the other variants of COVID.
Correct.
Yes.
So now when you actually see what's on the road is not what was in the lab.
Right, but is that because of human interaction, right? Because it is going to mutate based on our bodies, right? Our immune system, how it reacts. That's what viruses do, is mutate, right?
That's what natural viruses do. Natural viruses mutate.
What's the difference between a natural virus and an engineered? So you don't think an engineered virus would mutate?
That's another reason why I don't think it was engineered. Exactly.
Engineered viruses cannot mutate.
We don't really have many engineered viruses at all. What we have is engineered medicine.
What is an engineered virus?
An engineered virus would be a virus that you go into and you actually you tinker with the cells or the genetic makeup of the virus itself.
So with that logic, we won't be able to, there will be no warfare in that way. I see us having some sort of, at some point in the future, I see some kind of medical warfare, some kind of
Germ warfare.
Yeah, germ warfare, right? Whether that's through water or through, they cut it down now, so we good. Yeah, it's good. But some kind of like germ warfare, or some kind of, I feel like that's coming. Do you put no credence on?
Oh, I believe germ warfare is coming. I mean, we've already seen germ warfare.
That's what so why would COVID can't fit in that category?
Because all the chemical warfare is the closest thing we've seen to germ warfare. And chemical warfare doesn't mutate. The chemicals that they create, the weapons that they create using
chemicals don't. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but
biological warfare has always existed.
Okay.
And the way that it exists is you introduce an existing germ into a culture that has never had that germ before. And then the damage from that is devastating, right? We saw this happen with the Pilgrims and the Indians, right? The Pilgrims had smallpox, and they had experienced it, and they knew that, it affected white people a certain way. But when they gave white pox-infested blankets to the Indians, the Native Americans had never seen it before. Their bodies had never experienced it before, so it devastated them, right? We've seen examples like that happen in Africa, where one African country is attacking another African country, and they bring some sort of bloodborne illness or mosquito-based illness, or they bring some kind of some sort of fish or biting gnat or something, right? It's the reason why when a box comes from Guam or the Pacific Islands and it goes to LA and it lands in LA, they check it for insects, because those insects can carry germs that have diseases that could infect us.
Right. So I'm saying if they'll use insects, why won't we think they'll use, germs?
The difference is the scientific engineering of it specifically, right? What insects carry is a natural, biological, organic.
So tell me the reason why you don't believe it is because of how it was engineered, or what is the reason why you don't believe that it was some sort of warfare or some sort of release by China?
The two reasons are because, one, I haven't seen enough evidence to suggest that it was a man-made virus. I have seen enough evidence to show that it was a contagious virus, to show that it was a novel, unique virus, to show that it fit the other strands of COVID before it, like SARS, like COVID-1 and COVID-2. Like we've seen that it fits the model of other organic COVID variants. But what I haven't seen is information that suggests that it fits any kind of man-made model, and the fact that it was released in China first makes me feel like it wasn't an intentional release. And then third, the fact that it has spread, but it has acted like an organic virus acts. It gets weaker with every mutation, it changes with every mutation, it acts like an organic virus. It doesn't act like a man-made weapon.
I think but that could speak to it being released too soon. That but I do think some information came out that it was man-made. I'm almost certain. There was an assessment that came out by, I think it was NIH, by some federal government organization came out and said that they had new information that suggested it had come from a lab in Wuhan. Yes.
I'm not.
Of course, that part, but right. I almost.
But the man-made engineered chemical, like the man-made engineered germ, that is still, for me, there's not enough preponderance of evidence. We talked about how easy it is to sell people a story when it's just one stream of information. That's what I'm looking for. So I need multiple streams of information that are telling me the same story.
I don't have enough on it, but I'm almost certain that I've been hearing conversations from people that's like, and they're laying it out. But I didn't expect for us to go down that road. But damn, I'm almost certain. So you don't believe it's man-made? That's a good conversation. But so you don't see. How do you see as someone who has the background you have? How would you see them initiating a germ warfare? Yeah.
So when you go through the strategic implementation of how germ warfare or biological warfare would be carried out, there's a number of specific ways that you would execute that kind of strategy. So first of all, wherever you create the germ itself, you would most likely not create that on your own territory. So if we were experimenting with biological weapons, we would not put that lab in the United States because you immediately risk what we saw happen
just
with
on
COVID.
risk assessment, yeah.
So we take that to some third world country, dude. Let's go to Ecuador. Let's go to Peru. Let's go to the Bahamas. The Bahamas are great because it's an island, right? Let's go some third world country where we can very easily and spend a bunch of money and people are going to look the other way. And that's where you create your lab.
That makes sense.
And that's where you start tinkering and experimenting. And when shit goes wrong, people in the Bahamas get sick, not people in Nashville, Tennessee.
Exactly. That definitely makes sense. Let me ask you about Trump a little bit. How do you think the CIA views someone like him?
So I know that the CIA did not view Trump well. Right. We all know that. And that was for lots of reasons. Now, one of the things that's really difficult is whether we want to admit it or not, Donald Trump's presidency was the closest presidency that we've seen since probably Gerald Ford that matched what the founding fathers wanted for our country. Because what they wanted were career business professionals to step out of their profession and become a public servant for 1 to 2 tours. They did not want career politicians. And what we've seen for the entirety of our lifetimes is professional politicians.
Right.
That's why you see the Kennedy family, the Clinton family, the Bush family.
Right.
So unfortunately, what we saw around Trump was this harken back to what our founding fathers originally wanted. Now, I don't think that they wanted someone specifically like Donald Trump, but what we did see was the power of enterprise and the power of corporate recognition to generate support from the population, right? And a lot of people voted Trump just because they've heard the name 1,000 times. So that's important. Now, the CIA is used to working because the CIA serves as under the executive branch.
Right.
And there's 3 branches of government.
It's important to understand how they even are intertwined with the president.
Correct. So CIA doesn't serve the legislative branch. They're not doing what Congress and the Senate say. They don't serve the judicial branch. They're not doing what the courts say. They serve the executive branch, which means CIA is built and designed to serve one office, the office of the president. So when Donald Trump took over and he was shrouded in conspiracy and suspicion about his connections to Russia, the same organization that's charged with spying on Russia and discovering whether or not there's a tie to Russia, like whether there's a threat from Russia to the United States, is CIA, who works for Donald Trump. So when CIA said anything about Donald Trump being compromised to Russia, that's immediately causing conflict with essentially their primary client.
That's what I was going to ask. How do they respond to allegations of him being compromised?
So what ended up happening is CIA got themselves in this very sticky situation where they're investigating it and trying to communicate the ways that he was connected and the ways that Russia's trying to influence us at the same time that the president was trying to tell the CIA, I don't want to hear this, right? Like, I'm my own man. Maybe that's what they're doing, but stop trying to make me look bad. And the outcome of that, the fallout from that, is what we saw during that Trump administration, where he just stopped listening to CIA. He stopped listening. He stopped caring. He stopped sending money that way.
I know they was upset with that. Like,
absolutely.
What are we doing?
Yep. And this is another thing that's unfortunate but still true. Not unfortunate, but it's uncomfortable but still true. When the government can't do something effectively, commercial enterprise steps in. So from 2016 to 2020, during the Trump administration, he did not fund or rely on CIA. He relied on the commercial business sector instead to start collecting intelligence. And that led to the rise of private intelligence, your groups like Blackwater, and et cetera.
I remember that, yes.
So now what ended up happening is the United States was collecting more intelligence, executing more operations, having more of an intelligence impact around the world because they were using commercial institutions instead of federal institutions. We don't go into space right now with NASA. We go into
SpaceX,
a commercial enterprise. Right? Because what happens is when you take things away from the government and you put it into commercial enterprise, businessmen find a way to do it
better,
yeah. Faster, cheaper.
Yes, it's a lot of bureaucracy in that government stuff.
So from 2016 to 2020, the private intelligence world grew. And then when Biden took power in 2020, Now all of a sudden he was in this awkward position where he has a thriving private intelligence industry. I work in the private intelligence industry, right? Here's this private intelligence industry keeping wealthy people safe, keeping wealthy celebrities safe, teaching them how to do everything from protect their digital stance to, when and where they can go on tour and have the best chances for high revenue and low risk, right? This whole industry emerged because of Donald Trump. And now Biden was stuck in this position where he couldn't just shut that industry down because it's benefiting GDP. But at the same time, he had to start rebuilding that relationship with CIA. And the reason that private intelligence industry grew so quickly was because guess what the CIA employees were doing from 2016 to 2020?
Going to the private sector, yeah.
Because they didn't like working for Donald Trump.
So, wow. So with Trump being in that position and CIA being all information and intelligence, how do they negotiate with someone who they don't have more power than, who's just saying, hey, I'm not listening, who could be operating with secrets he don't know he operating with that's more risky than he can even consider? And
that is exactly the problem that I don't think has been solved yet after that 16 to 20 period. CIA they've never really had to deal with a president who wasn't a career politician. Because remember, CIA was born in the 1950s. So from the time that they've been in existence, they've always had career politicians as presidents.
Right.
So they've always had a history of government service. So when somebody comes into office, they don't really have that many secrets.
Right.
And they're certainly not usually tied heavily to foreign powers. Now, if you recall, Bush had connections with the Middle East. Cheney had investments all over the world. There have been connections between the Kennedys and Europeans. There have always been foreign connections. But the question of whether or not a foreign intelligence service controlled the president, the first time that ever came to light was with Trump.
Right. And I just imagine that to be rough. What skill set do they put in place? I mean, can't leverage anything on them, can't coerce them into doing anything.
And you can't spy on the president directly because he's the client. He dictates what you can and can't do to him. And then you've also got the same problem that recently happened in New York when they tried to arrest Trump and bring him into
the courts, I forgot.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But
yeah.
The Secret Service, because Trump he's an ex-president now, he was an active president then. The Secret Service is a federal institution charged with protecting the physical requirements of a president and all ex-presidents. So when the New York police wanted to go in and arrest President Trump and take him to the court, they had to coordinate with the Secret Service. I mean,
this is a mess, man.
It's a huge mess. This is why the world looks at us and laughs at us right now.
So what do we say, or because how much risk is involved with the president going rogue like that? Is there a lot of risk involved with that? I mean, from an intelligence perspective.
In reality, no, there is not a lot of risk. It's ideologically infuriating to think that your president might be under the control of the Russian intelligence service. But in reality, the president is just one part of government. The president doesn't get to do much without buy-in from Congress or the Senate or the approval of the courts. They don't. The courts the Senate can actually impeach the president and pull the president out of office without the court system at all.
Wow.
Right? So if you think about it, we have a checks and balance system that makes it so that even if a president is heavily compromised, the damage he can really do is fairly limited. Limited to executive orders, which get overturned by the next president, which we see every year, right? Or every 4 years. And then on top of that, he's got limited, or the president has limited jurisdiction, and the jurisdiction is always withheld or cut off by funding because all funding comes from the legislative branch.
Do you think the election was stolen?
I think that the election was an accurate reflection of what the American people wanted.
You do?
I do. And here's why. The election in 2020 was record-breaking for lots of reasons. The first thing that's important for all of us to acknowledge is that more people voted for Donald Trump in 2020 than there were people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016. So no matter how chaotic those 4 years were, more people in
Came
America
out.
came out and said, I want to vote him back into office. That's important. But equally important, or more important, is that more people than ever voted Democrat. Ever.
For real, I didn't know that.
It was the largest election, the largest turnout of all time, more than the Obama election, which was the largest of all time before that, right? In terms of sheer numbers and new voters. And even still, you saw so many Democrats come out to support the alternate. And I'm not sure that people wanted Biden, but for damn sure there was a lot of people who did not want Donald Trump.
Right. Wow. Damn. So, what do you say to Trump that continues to say it's stolen? I mean, can anyone stop that? We've ordered court, like court has dismissed a lot of things, right? He's been told that the election was not stolen. Of course, we know there is some interference in elections. All elections is not zero, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to sway the election. And I believe that it's dangerous, or it could be dangerous. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I was watching the town hall. I don't know if you saw with Donald Trump. Town hall on CNN, where he spoke with one of their people, and it was crazy. They even came out, CNN, the next day to say, we're sorry for letting him come up. We shouldn't have gave him a platform, because he sat next to that woman. And of course she had her earpiece in. So when he said something, they'll feed her, that's not right. This is actually, so she would try to, hey, that actually didn't happen. And he would double down and triple down, like we said, like not compromising, too much riding on me, saying, giving in to what you're saying. I just wonder what really shocked me, or what really had me feeling away, was that the crowd was clapping. Like this is almost like a comedy show. I'm like, yo, this is much more serious than like some show that we're watching. They're taking this almost like entertainment at this point. And I don't know how, I think that's kind of strange, man.
What is important to understand about politics, whether you're into politics or not into politics, what's important to understand is that politics is a form of entertainment.
Wow.
It's what it is. That's why they call it a political roadshow, right? Because it is a show. And when it comes to entertainment, the real objective behind entertainment, the CIA taught us that human beings normalize into two groups. And it's called the 80-20 rule. Maybe you've heard of it in business or other places, right? 100% of the population always breaks into two groups. One group has 80%, the other group has 20%. So if you're looking at business, 100% of people that find your business, 80% will never buy from you, 20% will buy from you, right? The same thing happens in politics. Of 100% that find you, 80% are not going to listen to you, not going to believe you, not going to vote for you. But that means 20% will. The reason that Trump became such a phenomenon in business and in politics is because he kept putting himself in front of big audiences. Well, guess what? No matter how many people think he's crazy, there will always be the 20% that's in the audience that leaves that day believing him, right? And that's the key to politics. And that's why in the lead up to elections, what do presidential candidates do? They go from city to city in front of big audiences,
big shows,
giving
almost.
Big shows, right? And in those shows, oftentimes at that point in the game, the show is full of people waving signs and clapping, right?
But when
but only 20% are convinced. The other 80% are there waiting to be convinced.
Exactly. Yes. But I mean, damn though, I feel like it's just it takes the validity, it takes the prestige out of the highest office in the land. And when we're laughing, like this dude to say they're laughing, they're joking. It's like, Trump just killed you. It's like, yeah, but he's talking about an election that he's saying was stolen. And it's like, to me, it's much more gravity associated with that.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. There should be a great deal of gravitas and respect when you're dealing with the person who leads our country. That should happen, but that is not what's happening now. Because culturally, we have let ourselves be overcome by this information age. And what what type of information has been the most commonly produced information since the advent of the internet? Not educational content.
Entertainment. Yeah.
So you, me, the people we meet on the street, our kids, our family, our friends, what everybody's looking for all the time. In a first world country, we're a first world country. We are the richest country in the world.
Whoa, hold on. I go by Loon. All of my interviews with everyone that you love. It's available on patreon.com. It's up there podcast ad free, as well as the show with just me, where I talk directly to the culture. Plenty more perks. I see you there. Let's get back to the show. Yeah.
We have the least worries of anybody else. So even with all the concerns that people have, we have less worries than any other country in the world, which means we have the most free space
to seek after entertainment and things like that. That's so crazy. I know you said the CIA does like global intelligence, and the FBI does domestic intelligence. So I want to focus on two people. I want to focus on Farrakhan and Snowden.
Okay.
How did the CIA get involved with Farrakhan if it's supposed to be an FBI problem?
So Farrakhan is not a name that's ringing a bell for me.
Farrakhan is a Nation of Islam.
Okay.
How else can I explain Farrakhan? He's the leader of the Nation of Islam. Like, he has some dealings with Gaddafi. Mm-hmm. He had some dealings with, and I think that's kind of when the CIA got involved, is that Gaddafi offered to give him like some couple $1 billion, just like, I want to help you guys or something. And they said, you take that money, you can't come back on this soil or something. It was like they gave him an ultimatum. And this was the CIA, so you don't even know Farrakhan.
Yeah, it's not familiar to me. What was the year?
Let me see.
Yeah, what was the year? If there was Gaddafi money involved, that could exactly be it.
That's what I was thinking. I just wanted to ask you, from being on the inside, like.
Yeah. Gaddafi is definitely one of those names that the way that wealth was generated, the way that wealth has been managed, it's blood money.
How?
So because it's stolen money. It's stolen money that was illegally protected, hidden, carried out. It's tied to a lot of nefarious activity that the United States doesn't want to have floating through its own currency reserves.
Does the United States take any money from not so great people?
Oh yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. But remember, there's always a balancing act between doing something that has the shadow of a doubt and doing something that is brazen.
But who says what the shadow of a doubt is?
That's where
that's what it's like. Because
the politicians that we vote are the ones who decide what risks they're going to take, right? So, when and it's not just the United States. I mean, there's multiple countries around the world that don't want to touch any kind of money that's related to Muammar Gaddafi.
Wow. And see, I don't know his background. That's why I'm asking. I mean, I know his name. I don't necessarily know all the things tied to him. I did find it interesting that he reached out to Farrakhan in that time. But him and Farrakhan had, from what my understanding is, a relationship. Farrakhan had never did anything, didn't have a record, he's a very powerful black man, though. He the one you familiar with the Million Man March?
Oh, yeah.
He's the one he was the head of that. So he orchestrated that both times that it happened. And so he's always been kind of that big voice for black people. One of the greatest speakers of all time. But to have people following you like that, you have to speak well.
Right. You have to be charismatic.
Man.
You have to be convincing. You have to be passionate.
Yes.
Yeah.
He checks all those boxes. But yeah, I mean, I think when we talk again, we'll probably dive into that a little bit. Edward Snowden.
Yes.
You don't feel like he did the right thing?
Snowden had the right intention, right? He just did it the wrong way. He was not the only person at NSA who was uncomfortable with that project. There were multiple people at NSA who had voiced discomfort, displeasure, who had officially filed complaints or reports about that project specifically. But you also have to remember where we were in history. At the time, we were trying to root out sleeper cells, terrorists that were living among us that were going to kill thousands of Americans at a time, right?
So it's okay if there's a reason, you're saying.
What I'm saying is we have to ask ourselves, do we feel like it's okay for the government to overstep our privacy if it's looking for a threat to us? I am of the opinion that yes.
But see,
I've got nothing to hide. If you can protect my family by spying on my financial records or my phone calls, you're not going to find anything.
But see, that sounds
about
good
me.
in theory. I'm with you. Like, we do nothing. So in theory, that sounds good. But that can get slippery.
It can.
That can get very slippery. Like, I can have a child. My son can be going through some, God forbid, knock on wood. He could be having maybe some testicle ball cancer.
Yeah.
I'll say it that way.
Right.
And I can have pictures of it in my phone to be like, man, what the hell? I want to send it to my mom.
Yeah.
Send it
To the doctor. Yeah.
And those pictures can flag something to make me, it's like, I don't know how slippery that gets when we talk about, long as they're looking for a threat. Okay, what's classified a threat? Now we integrate with AI. Now we integrate with people be able to use my voice, my likeness, my face. Like, what is a threat? What do we classify a threat? Like, I don't know. Some people draw a hard line. Like, no, I'm not. Government, stay out of it. Like, and you're saying that security versus privacy.
Security versus convenience.
Convenience.
Right. Exactly right. And that's, for me, that's the calculation that I run everything through. And you're exactly right. And the concerns that people have are valid concerns. If I'm talking about, I really hate the president, or I really hate my congressperson, somebody should, I hope that guy dies in a car accident. You don't want to end up on some FBI hit list because you sent a text message about whatever. But the thing is, we have to remember that the government has to prioritize threats. So if I say, I wish my congressperson died in a car accident, that is one text message out of thousands that I send in a day, and most of the ones that I send in a day are like, I love you, babe. How are the kids doing? What do you need from the grocery store?
Well, like me, getting ready for this interview, I jot down my notepad, CIA this, and, Gaddafi and China. And,
right.
Like, that could be, if, again, without context. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we can classify things as threats without context.
And that's what I find comforting about AI. Because what AI will do is be able to create immediate context that a human analyst can't do. Right?
Tell me how.
So AI will be able to scrub through your example.
Give you a percentage.
Your example of researching for me today, right? AI in an hour would scrub every episode you've ever done, all of the research on this computer. It would follow your IP address to previous computers. It would scrub everything, and it would say, he is high probability he's interviewing a CIA officer. That's like 90% probability. 0.003% probability he's planning for a terrorist attack.
Right.
So you would fall on the bottom of a list.
That makes sense.
That some terrorist would fall at the top of the list.
Now, without AI, because that's what we're talking about, with them labeling it a threat and being able to overstep.
Yep.
I wanna understand your thought process behind that. Why is that okay?
Because without AI, what you end up having is human predictability, and humans are predictable. So
To a certain extent.
humans are predictable to a very large extent. But yes, there's always a certain
So tell
level.
me, so what was all right? There was nothing predictable about you being who you are today.
There was actually quite a bit of.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought you said mom wanted you to go.
Yep.
That at some point you broke off.
Because CIA hired me, they recruited me because of a predictable model. They knew exactly who I was, and then all they did is kind of validate.
But that was predictable for them, not for you.
Correct, predictable for them. I said humans are predictable. I didn't say that we're predictable for ourselves.
Okay.
Right? So when it comes to like a police officer, this is really important for anybody who's concerned about law enforcement or lawyers or attorneys or any of that.
Oh, I got to ask you something about that too. Go
No
ahead.
problem, no problem. So it's really important to understand that law enforcement, they're all in a career. They're trying to become successful in their career, just like you're becoming successful in your career, and anybody out there is trying to become successful in their career. The way that a law enforcement professional becomes successful is by enforcing the law, which means bringing criminals to justice. So they want to close as many cases as they can close in a year, because at the end of the year, their case history gets reviewed. And if they did a good job, they move up. And if they did a bad job, they don't.
And there's a lot of inflation in that.
So what ends up happening is when you're trying to get a lot of things done, you're always looking for the easiest case.
Shortcuts, yes.
The fastest case,
Yes.
the simplest case.
Right.
In many cases, that's why the judicial system has found itself not being fair.
Right.
Because certain judges are going to lean a certain way.
We're going to get to that real soon. That's such a good conversation.
Right?
Yes.
With a certain kind of
Yes.
background. And they're going to be slower to mediate a case with a different kind of background. So you got to keep that in mind with law enforcement. So when it comes to, they're looking for terrorists. They're not looking for guys cheating on their wife or taking pictures of testicles.
I don't know. I mean,
because they can't close that case.
But how does Farrakhan? But you don't know Farrakhan. But there's people that's been on American soil that's been of interest of the CIA, right?
Sure.
Of American people, right? Even like, I don't know if Edward is American, but of course they looked at him as a traitor. But I'm trying to understand why. I mean, do you think you're jaded because you've been in the CIA that you just trust the government like that?
I don't trust the government. I think there's a rule of logic called a razor. There's a rule of logic that CIA teaches us, and they teach all like elite intelligence types the same razor, and that razor is called Hanlon's razor, and it says that never ascribe to conspiracy that which can be explained through idiocy. That explains our federal government, brother. Think about how much work, intelligence, skill, and loyalty has to go into a conspiracy. A lot. It's so much easier.
But we have saw them.
We've seen some.
Yeah.
But most.
So we know they exist.
We know some exist, but most do not. Right?
Right.
And we've also seen.
And I believe most do not, just for the record. Yeah.
And we've seen that idiocy is very, very common.
Yes.
Right?
And it's interesting. Entertainment, with the internet, the tech has just.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it's much easier to believe that most people working for the government are just mediocre employees. It's easier to believe that than it is to believe that they're all super intelligent, super loyal conspiracy types that are lying to the American people. Do I believe that there are some? Yes, I absolutely believe there are some, but not the majority.
But how much involvement does everyone have to have in a conspiracy? I don't think it has to be from the top to the bottom.
You're right.
I think that it could be some small, like even with the drug war, we can go ahead and get into that. With their involvement with a guy named Rick Ross, CIA met with Rick Ross in Nicaragua. Like they had a whole operation. The CIA literally was involved with making sure that he had a clear path to get that cocaine to LA. And so we have saw them have their hand, not necessarily CIA, but we've saw government influence with conspiracies. What was said, no, it's no way CIA would have been allowing this dude to get on a plane with 40 kilos of cocaine or 400, whatever it might have been, and go through Nicaragua. People have died saying that didn't happen. And now they have proof that, he was working with the CIA.
One of the things that, remember the CIA, we talked earlier about how it has this element of ethical flexibility. It has to. Because
Moral or ethical?
moral and ethical.
Okay.
Right? And it's a fair point. They're not the same thing.
Right.
I use them interchangeably.
Right.
We call it moral flexibility. What it's often interpreted as is ethical flexibility.
Okay.
But you're right. There's this element of moral flexibility. And the reason that element exists is because when you're trying to carry out an operation that is part of a larger goal, you have to crack eggs along the way, right? So I don't know the Rick Ross case in detail.
You have to get into
But what I will say is if CIA found an opportunity, especially if CIA and FBI working together found an opportunity to take down a larger objective.
It was all a money play.
If it was just a money play,
It was literally a money play.
Then I don't have any comment.
Right. He says,
Yeah.
but at some point, maybe on an airplane or something. Look into that a little bit, just to be like, what happened with this? Because they didn't take anyone down. It wasn't like this. It literally was, it was in the 80s. It seems like this is an opportunity. Now, I don't know the details of it in particular. I got Ross coming on soon, so I'll get into some of the conversations he and Matt had. Not one day, maybe get y'all two to sit down or something just to talk understanding of a very short segment. But yeah, man, he had literally and this came out in court. This came out in court documents, movies. I don't know if you know Snowfall, big series. I think it's on FX or something. That's based off his movie. Wow. I mean, off his lifestyle, and sold plenty of books. He ended up doing time, but I mean, and we'll get back to the conspiracy thing, but we have saw them involved with things that we would say it's no way they would do that.
Correct. And it's because of that moral flexibility. CIA will absolutely get involved in things that are against American law because we are granted the authority to work outside of American law on foreign soil. We can't work outside of the American law on American soil. FBI can, NSA can, but CIA can't.
So when we think about, I just lost what I was going to say, and it was good because you had just said something
that we operate outside of America. We operate outside of American law.
Before that, what you say right before that?
That in order for us to carry out larger operations, sometimes we have to use this moral.
Oh, okay, yeah. So how do we know when they're inserting that to label something a threat? Like, hey, moral flexibility. He's a threat, and I'll tell you why I said that, because I know you may not know Farrakhan, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in particular, but the CIA and the Muslim religion, right? He has that element as well, and that's a global thing, right? Because even though the Muslims in Afghanistan and the Muslims in Nashville, there's a disconnect as to behavior, but the ideology somewhere down the line coexist. Do you think the CIA looks at religion, in particular the Muslim faith, in any kind of threatening way because of its global reach?
I don't believe that any American institution looks at a religion carte blanche and has a bias against that religion, because we've seen almost every religion get fundamentalized and turned into extremism and turned into violence. The American people, the masses, oftentimes confuse Islam with Islamic extremism. They don't understand that they're two completely different things. But the American public also doesn't understand that there are very extremist versions of Catholicism.
Exactly.
And they don't understand that there are very extremist versions of Buddhism, right? They don't understand that. They don't read about it. They don't hear about it. In their worldview, it doesn't exist, right? I've lived in the Middle East. I've lived in UAE. I've served with Jordanians, with Emiratis, with Saudis, with Pakistanis. Islam is a beautiful, beautiful religion in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
But
we know that, but from a CIA perspective, from an intelligence perspective, saying, hey, y'all ran into like the buildings, the ICE, whatever, that's also on the same, we want to figure out what influence and things.
Institutionally, CIA knows that Islam is a beautiful religion.
Okay.
Just like it knows Buddhism is, just like it knows Catholicism is, just like it knows Protestantism, it knows it, right? What they're interested in is, and they do it for everybody equally, the background check to find out if there's a connection to the extremist versions of whatever religion you have.
Wow. So I wonder, do they look at, because I don't take all of now I'm an information guy and I have to ignore my emotions, but my emotions tell me if you run into a building over here, I'm going to having to look at people that come from that umbrella. Like, I'm gonna have to start paying attention. Like, yeah, man, well, them people hate us, right? And so I know you saying they don't, but I'm just like, yo, I don't know how they could separate the two, in that way. And I want to read this to you about the crack era. It says CIA allegedly supported drug trafficking networks contributing to the influx of crack cocaine in predominantly black communities, resulting in significant social and economic consequences. So this is like covert operations. And that's what I'm saying. It's like they was with Ross in that crack era when it was like came out of nowhere. And it was almost like they weren't bringing the cocaine to anywhere but the less fortunate neighborhoods, right? I'm surprised you don't know anything about that.
Well, first of all, it was in the 80s, so it was before I was at CIA. And then the CIA had a humongous institutional change in 2001.
Okay.
After 9/11, right?
I would imagine.
Prior to 2001, CIA was a very small organization, largely white men, largely Ivy League. Like, it was a very homogeneous, insular group that was exclusive, right? You had to know somebody to know somebody to know somebody.
Right.
Well, that's why 9/11 happened, because this insular, homogeneous group of people was too pig-headed and narrow-sighted to cooperate with FBI to prevent 9/11.
Is that why they say it was an inside job?
That's one of the reasons that conspiracy exists, is because the question has, and rightfully so, the question has come out, how did FBI and CIA both have intelligence pointing at an attack on 9/11, and neither of them were able to actually prevent it from happening? Right? That's the big question that pisses everybody off. That's what came out of the 2003 9/11 Commission. And that's why the Senate and the House and the President all came together and said, hey, CIA, hey, FBI, you've been doing this your own way, and your way sucks. So now you're going to do it our way. And you're going to increase your hiring, you're going to change your systems, change your processes, and now we're going to be less focused on how do we fight Russia, and we're going to be more focused on how do we protect Americans from terrorists and from emerging threats around the world. I came into CIA in 2007. It had been transforming for the previous 4 years. It really didn't settle out until 2009. And then in 2010, President Obama announced another big initiative called the Asia Pivot, and we started pivoting away from the global war on terrorism and more into what's going on in Asia. So you can see how the world, like the government it's not a box that just stays the same. It's always shifting.
It has to change.
Yeah.
It has to change. What about what events took place when you were serving?
So the big events that really impacted us from 2007 to when I left in 2014, the Boston bombing was a big one.
Wow.
Right?
And that was internal.
The Boston bombing was inside the United States, exactly right. That was a massive one that happened.
Give me some insight on that. What were you thinking? What was your thoughts, feelings?
I was furious. I'm sure many of us were furious. Terrified. Like, it was one of those examples of a lone wolf attack that, two people carried out on their own. The larger guidance, they were extremists that were converted or that were trained from a distance, right? It was online extremism.
That was new. All this is new stuff. And then I wondered, like, all right, bomb goes off, boom.
Yeah, in the middle of
you
a
have
race.
Nothing.
Yeah.
As CIA, you don't know anything. Take me through the process of how do you, like, of course, no, nothing crazy, but how do you guys track that back? Even, like, it's just, where do you start?
Well, you start with the police, right? That's where you start. So the bomb went off in Boston, and if you recall that the bomb went off, and within, I think, 12 hours, the Boston police had captured both bombers by literally chasing them through backyards.
And they were trying to run.
So once they captured the two guilty parties, then they bring them in, and now CIA and FBI can start doing what they do. And FBI starts first. FBI starts questioning them, takes their cell phones, starts analyzing their cell phones. Who are their connections? What are the phone calls that they've made in the last 24, 48, 72 hours? Which of those phone numbers are American phone numbers? And then let's review those phone numbers to see who else in America is connected to them. Because was the Boston bombing supposed to be just Boston, or was it the first of what was supposed to be multiple? we don't really know because FBI did their job very well, right? Now, any phone numbers that FBI finds that are outside of the United States, connect those to CIA, because now CIA is going to ask the question, were these two people motivated, and was this in coordination with some extremist group outside of the country? So now we start looking, who's outside of the country, who's connected to these individuals, how can we run this investigation internationally?
Makes sense.
So that you can build a more comprehensive picture of everything. Right? But it's not a one-man show. It's very much a combination of skill sets and experience sets at multiple levels, from local police to FBI to CIA, field operatives, technical operatives, analytical officers, all of us.
And I think that was the first time that I seen internet extremists turn to actual, like, resonate like that, like actually materialize. I've never seen it like go from, you see people say shit online, but this actually turned into something. What else? So the Boston bombing happened.
The rise of ISIS.
Yep. What happened to ISIS?
The entire life cycle of ISIS happened. So policies that were put in place for combating organized extremism overseas, right? Radical Islam overseas. Those policies just started to work, right? Other countries stopped supporting ISIS. Efforts to limit and control their ability to recruit new extremists was also effective in Europe and in the United States. The big difference between ISIS and Al-Qaeda was that Al-Qaeda had a funding source because they were able to tap into very wealthy Arabs that lived in Saudi Arabia, like Osama bin Laden. So they always had money.
Right.
You need money to run a giant organization. ISIS never had that. ISIS had passionate extremists. It had some...
But they seemed to get huge. It seemed like
they created a new caliphate, right? If you recall, they created a whole path.
Yes.
But what ended up happening is they created so many enemies during that process. They created enemies out of the terrorist groups because there were terrorist groups trying to operate inside the same area as the caliphate. And then they tried to force the terrorist groups to pay them taxes for protection, right? And then they also pissed off the countries themselves. And then they also pissed off the allies for the countries themselves. So they ended up creating...
Boxed themselves out.
And everybody was working against them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't Trump that ended ISIS, even though he takes credit for it.
Yeah.
Right? In many ways, ISIS is still out there. It's just not as powerful as it used to be.
And then I was reading something about the World Food Program that Taliban was like using it to like only give it to its people and no one else can use it, and they're using man, I was reading so much stuff to get prepared for this. Even in Ukraine, they were saying like just wait for the winter months.
Yeah.
Something's crazy gonna happen in the winter months where people are gonna just start to die off.
And they did, but nobody talks about it.
Wow.
Yeah, so the Economist, an international news source out of the UK, actually just did a fantastic analytical piece.
Whoa, hold on. I go by Loon. All of my interviews with everyone that you love. It's available on patreon.com. It's up there, podcast ad-free, as well as the show with just me, where I talk directly to the culture. Plenty more perks. I see you there. Let's get back to the show.
Where they looked at the number of deaths in Europe this winter compared to averages. Because Putin's goal in cutting off and making it difficult for power to go to Europe was to disincentivize Europe from supporting Ukraine.
Yes.
Right? Now, the stories that we've all been told is that there's a surplus of energy and there's extra energy and there's plenty of natural gas and the winter was mild anyways. What nobody's talking about is that 70,000 Europeans, 70,000 more Europeans died this winter than died last winter.
I was reading about that.
Now the total number of Europeans that died this winter over last winter was like 190,000 people.
Now how is that happening?
So there's a mix. So partially there's a normal mortality rate.
Right.
People die. Right? And we know what that normal mortality rate is because it's calculated every year. So whatever that normal rate is for Europe was baked into that calculation. And then we know that there's an elevated mortality rate because of COVID. Because COVID is still out there killing old people and killing people who are immunocompromised. So we know what COVID deaths look like because we've been tracking those for 3 years. But when you take out the COVID deaths and you take out the normal mortality rate, there's still a 70,000 person surplus of dead Europeans. And that according to The Economist, is what they attribute to the energy war that Russia and Europe are playing right now.
And that's what I was saying. It's like in war, I think a regular, just American citizen does not understand all the different facets and elements of like war, when it's like, hey, we can go in at this time, winter's bad on them. If we're at war in winter, it's gonna, it's so much that goes into it.
Right.
It's deep.
War theory and war planning is a fascinating strategic exercise. And it's an exercise that Putin knows very well, because Putin has been a wartime president. He was the president in 2012 to 2016, I want to say it was, and he went to war in Chechnya. He's been president in Russia since, 2020, 2018? Like, he's been a president for multiple conflicts, and he is a very brazen, conflict-based president. He knows how it works. But let's not forget that Russia has a long history of winter warfare. That's what they did to Napoleon back during the Napoleonic Wars. That's what they did during World War II to the Germans. They understand winter, they understand cold, and they understand how people can't survive in the cold.
Yes.
And they make those sacrifices, right?
Wow, that is, man, I'm telling you, when I think about that, it's so much. It's like, man, people just think war, we're going to war. It's like, you don't know how much intel actually goes into that, man. Actually goes into that. I wanted to ask you about, I have a guy that has a case right now. And, well, before we get to that, because we got about 15 more minutes and we'll get out of here. What the hell was we just talking about?
Russia, winter.
Russia, Ukraine.
Deaths over the winter.
Yeah, okay. Damn, what the hell? Oh, you were telling me, you said Boston bombing.
The rise of ISIS.
And what else?
We had, that was North Korean nuclear testing was crazy during that whole time too. All the development of North Korea, Kim Jong-un took power while I was at the agency. The rise of Kim Jong-un and all of the stuff that went along with that, right? Remember all of the nuclear weapons development, missile testing, conflict with South Korea. That was when we had all the movies come out. People were afraid of like a North Korean invasion of the United States. You had Dennis Rodman going to North Korea to try to represent. Remember that? That
was crazy. Like, I don't know what he was like. It was, how could he even get cool with somebody like that? How does that work? I don't know how that'll work.
Well, to a certain extent, I don't fault Dennis Rodman.
You're right.
Because one of the things that we know doesn't work is when you just don't talk to people.
That's for sure.
And the United States has had this policy where it just won't talk to North Korea.
For nothing. What established that?
When North Korea and when the Korean War was happening, and then the dividing line was created, the demilitarized zone was created. It created a South Korea and a North Korea. They're still technically at war. There's just a line that says that we're not going to take the war past this area. In my opinion, that's very similar to probably what's going to happen in Ukraine. There will be a demilitarized zone.
Wow.
That Russia won't take all of Ukraine. Ukraine will not win all of its original borders back. That there's going to be...
Because he won't retreat.
He can't.
He can't retreat.
He can't. If he retreats, the very area that he's taken over in the Donbass region, that's the region he needs to control to maintain control of their oil resources and the natural gas.
So he's all in.
And if he's not all in, the next person who takes power will also be all in.
Wow. Because it's necessity to have that.
Yeah, it's an economic war. People don't like to talk about it, but wars are economic decisions.
Yes.
They're not ideological decisions.
Right.
To get Americans to sign up for the army and go die at war, they're given an ideological line.
Facts.
Right? That's the propaganda that gets people to say, think about it, like my life, a soldier at some point believes that their life is best spent dying for their country.
That's deep.
Isn't that crazy?
That's deep.
Isn't that crazy? Think about how productive a life could be when it's well lived.
Goodness gracious.
To think that the best
on
thing
the
you
field. Yeah, dying on the field.
Yeah, that happens because of ideological manipulation, propaganda, empty promises that takes somebody who has limited opportunities, and it convinces them that, hey, there's this great opportunity that you never thought you had.
Right.
It's a shame.
That's deep, and that's a lot. What do you want to understand from me? Any questions you have for me?
You know, one of the things that I'm always curious about is I find myself living in a white world.
Right.
The things I talk about, geopolitics, business, entrepreneurship, wealth, I serve very wealthy clients. They're predominantly white.
Right.
I don't mind serving white clients.
Right.
But I know that there are people that I can help. I know there's a community that I can reach.
Right.
And I don't know what I'm doing wrong or what I'm not doing enough of.
It's not, you know what I think?
To get a chance to reach them.
I think it's not you. I think it's people like me. You know, I think that we're underrepresented in these conversations, right? And that's why I do my best when I reach to Rogan or I reach to Pat Bev and these people, is because we're so underrepresented in these conversations. That's why my part of my show is more about just talking with people from all walks of life, information. Just let's learn something, teach the audience, you know, bridge some gaps. That's just what I'm about. But I think that, like you said, there's a thirst for it. And you guys, you may not identify the thirst, but I do. I understand 1,000,000% that there is a gap that needs to be bridged, because these conversations we enjoy the same way. And you can help some of the high clients in this area the same way you help in that area. What would you say is stopping that? Is it just platform? Is it like, what is hindering that?
So I don't know what's hindering it, but I do know that one of the things that's a limiting factor for me is that I go where I'm invited right now. And a lot of times what happens is the people who host me are also the people who then recommend me to their network.
Right.
So when I'm hosted by, you know, an intelligent Bitcoin investor who's Caucasian,
right,
and we have a productive conversation or a good podcast episode, or I serve their client needs, they recommend me to their 2 or 3 closest friends who are also just like them.
Right.
So
it's getting out of that box.
Correct. So yeah. I'm really excited because I'm starting to build more relationships and connect more with non-Caucasian hosts, with non-Caucasian audiences, and we'll to try to grow that out.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, we're gonna make sure that this is our first one, but we want to make this a recurring thing, just to talk topics, talk culture, talk society, you know, and just plug you into the audience, because again, there's a way to have these conversations, you know, there's a way for us to bridge these gaps. And I just want us to be more visible in this space, and also you be more visible in our space, right? Not only you, but doctors and scientists. I need my rap buddies to listen to these kind of conversations. I need my, you know, basketball playing buddies and football guys. I need all of us to tune into each other. And I'm probably the only person that can just go out on that ledge like that, because they can't take my cool card. See, that's the thing. A lot of people worry about that in my culture. They worry about if I go too far this way, they may take my cool card. You know, again, I told you earlier, I am in the culture for real. I come up, so I don't look for that validation. And we were speaking about that there's I call a disease where our young brothers think that the people that know me will automatically become my customers, and it causes for what we call a clout chase. You know, I don't know if you've been involved with any interviews where people clout chase, which is may take your interview, chop it up, and put a salacious headline on something to try to get people to view it more, or that calls for problem in our culture, because a lot of the behavior is irrational when it's dealing with emotion, right? People haven't learned to do mental hygiene. And so when someone bumps into you with some disrespect, the way that people react to it is like, you're like, what? That was too much for a video, dude. Yeah. You know, but they're irrational in that decision, because all they have is their word and their face and their reputation. They don't have a business to sit back off what they say on the internet. I don't care what they say on the internet. It's more so all I got is what they say about me.
Yeah, and it's funny that the whole clout chasing conversation is really interesting to me because, one thing that I would love to help any aspiring influencer, celebrity, entertainer, what I would love for them to understand is that all the people who are listening to us, all the people who watch you, they don't like you, right? What they like is whatever the reason is that they're watching.
Exactly.
So take reality television, right? I just finished a reality TV show for History Channel.
Okay.
It'll come out in a couple weeks. It's pretty cool.
Dope.
But when I sat with the History Channel executives, they were like, Andy, there's 3 types of people who watch our show. And I was surprised right away because I was like, oh no, people watch the History Channel because they love the History Channel.
Right.
They were like, no. There's the people who love us and the people who love the show. But then there's the people who hate the show. But they want to watch the show so they can talk shit about the show because they hate the show and they just want to be able to bitch about the people on Twitter.
Yes.
And then you have all the people who turn it on in the background and don't even pay attention to it because they're cleaning the house or they're doing whatever.
Yes.
Now, from the History Channel point of view, they're like, we don't really care because all 3 of those people
count as a click
or a rating or whatever else.
Yes.
So that's the thing. When I'm working with my Caucasian clients and they're influencers or they're athletes, I'm telling them, look, there's a lot of people subscribed to your Instagram account. A third of them are there because they really love you. Another third of them are there because they really hate you, but they still want to know what you're doing. And a third of them are there because they just had a wild hair up their ass and they click subscribe one day.
Yes.
And maybe they're not even checking Instagram anymore.
Yes. And we was talking about the legacy YouTube subscribers and all of that. And even on top of that, there's something that has to happen to turn notoriety into a business. So what I think also is missing is that people don't understand that there has to be a transition from these social media platforms from a viewer to a customer. And that transition is where I think people don't understand, right? Everybody that views me is not a customer of me. It's my job to turn some of these people that view me into customers. And then
serve the customer at a higher level.
Exactly.
I 100%
And
agree.
people don't understand, and I tell my rap buddies all the time, it's like they get so locked in, and again, with certain interviews and stuff, I understand that, when it's going on the gram, it ain't gonna get as many likes, but when this conversation lives, it's gonna do the job I need it to do. So some people won't sacrifice what it looks like on Instagram or what it looks like on some of these social media sites in efforts to really build the platform. When I take the other approach, like I told you, you build everything off social media or you build everything off YouTube in one blink of an eye that can vanish.
Yeah.
So we can't lay down in that,
Yeah, because somebody else controls everything.
Exactly.
They control who sees you, who subscribes to you, how often you're presented, what you can and can't post.
Exactly. And you think about the fact that, hey, what do I do to turn these people into customers? And I tell my YouTube people, because they be on me, man, drop more. I'm like, that's unfair to the people that's paying me.
Yeah.
I got to keep them happy. And then if they even see me to start doing y'all the same way they do them, I just invalidate their purchase. They say, why are we paying when we can just get it from over there? Like, no hard feelings. Like, no, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And in this business, bro, we got to figure out, and tap into other areas. Some people are not comfortable or wouldn't be comfortable having this conversation, right? From my background, it's like, what are we gonna talk about? It's like, but I kind of know a little bit about a little bit of everything, so hey, let's chop it up. Then I can learn, and that's what I think the audience also appreciates, that we learn together. Like that's why I ask you now, what do you want to know about culture, about because I'm sure your people are watching. Maybe they have questions about, hey, man, what's up with that? What does that really mean? Or how did that come to? Or what's this about? And I think we can learn together. I think that's what makes Rogan and Pat Bev and some of these shows so good, is because, you just curious, you learn on the fly, we're learning together, we're talking about different things.
Yeah.
So I really, really, truly believe in that. Do you find it hard to turn viewers to customers for you?
Thankfully, no. No, what I find is that, I've got geeking out again, I've got above average engagement rates, conversion rates, customer acquisition rates, everything's really strong for me.
That's so good, man.
But business-wise, I'm less worried about making money. I used to be worried about making money.
Right.
Now I'm less worried about making money, and I'm much more interested in how do I expand the impact? How do I reach more people? How do I get more people thinking differently?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where the real benefit comes. The bills are paid, and I'm being very honest, man. The bills are paid by rich white guys.
Yeah.
Let them pay the bills.
Yeah.
What I want to know is how do I reach college students who don't have the money to pay for me? How do I reach inner cities that don't have the money to pay for me? How do I reach and make that impact there?
Yeah.
Because guess what? My wealthy Caucasian clients and my wealthy Indian clients and any wealthy African American, they're all going to be that much prouder of their purchase when they know that I'm also
doing
reaching.
the real work. Yeah. And we're going to play our part in that. Like I said, man, it's literally about, because I don't have many recurring guesses, because a lot of people, it's not interesting enough for me to recur. It's like, oh man, you did something out there, let me holler at you really quick. But people like you and certain Umar Johnson and certain people that I'm like, yo, your perspective, we may just call you in just willy-nilly, like something may happen, yo bro, if whenever you get time, just get you back in, and I think that relationship with the audience and the community is going to show that, a lot of times too, and that's what presidents get wrong, is they come and they mess with it one time, or they come and go to the church or something that you ain't been up here in 2-3 years. All of a sudden you come in and I care so much about y'all and I need y'all vote. Like, bro, we're not dumb.
Yeah.
we not dumb, man. So I just think that us building this relationship is gonna help. I know it's gonna help with my community, and hopefully we can continue to do so, man.
Amen, dude. I would love that.
Yeah.
That's been
for sure, man. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. And one day I want to have a conversation about reggae music, brother, because there's something about reggae music that just speaks to my soul.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what it is.
Nah, it's that, man. It's the vibration. It's the
man.
vibration, man. It's the vibration. Ain't nothing like it. It's the vibration, man. But it's Up There Podcast, another episode, man. Classic episode. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next week. Let's get it. What's going on? It's your boy Big Loon. Right now, if you looked at this clip and you enjoyed it, hit subscribe. Watch the next video. We on the road to 100K subscribers on YouTube. If you're a fan, come to Patreon. We got exclusive videos there, and also the show with just me alone. Salute to the supporters. Verify your customers and know who's your viewers. It's Up There Podcast. Let's get it. Yo, what up? This Big Loon. This is It's Up There Podcast.